Now,
Yeah.
this next one is a very recent one. This is from University of North Carolina at Wilmington. And this
Uh-huh.
young man, Jake, who actually goes to the Ratio Christi meeting. I think he's just kind of a provocateur. He just likes to go and mess with the Christians. He's not a
Yes.
Christian himself.
Yeah.
He asked a couple of questions, and I had talked about how the New Testament has eyewitness testimony in it. And here's what Jake said about it. Let's go.
So I just wanted to address something that you said in an answer you gave to someone else earlier, and it's this idea of, I forget the exact words you used, like the traumatic event. What was the specific verb?
Impact event.
Impact event. Yeah. And you used like reports on 9/11, like remembering where you were on 9/11 for an example of this, segueing that into sort of evidence for perhaps the legitimacy of reports on the resurrection. Personally, I come from a psychology background. That's what I study here at UNCW. So I just wanted to bring up, I think it's interesting that you would use this as a topic and specifically use 9/11 as an example. Because as you can probably imagine, 9/11 is one of the most heavily studied impact events in the contemporary history of modern science. And it might seem a bit counterintuitive, but your intuitions on this are exactly and perfectly wrong. As it turns out, the very large amount of people have demonstrably false claims about where they were on 9/11. There's a lot of science and a lot of interesting things that go into this, but sort of a reason you use to support this claim is actually one of the reasons that's used to show why it's false. Hearing something over and over leads to a belief. I guess you seem to enjoy your cultural references, so one I might use to point this out is on the Luke, I'm your father versus no, I'm your father, where vast majority of people might have at one point believed that the sentence was Luke, I'm your father, when that's just not the case. So just wanted to see if you had a response to that, where you using these two pieces of evidence, when in reality it's been very heavily studied that the claims you're making are patently false.
I think if we surveyed everybody in this room who's old enough, they would know where they were at 9/11.
Sure, they might think they do. But that's sort of the point, right? Is any answer you give, you believe to be true.
Okay.
But the point of the studies is to show that these beliefs are impossible.
Okay, Jake, I know exactly where I was, who I was talking to, and what was on the TV at the time.
Yeah. That's
okay. Cool. Secondly, it might be the case that, yes, people get wrong certain details, but do you think anybody at 9/11 in Manhattan would mistake that the Twin Towers fell that day?
Probably not.
No.
But that's not the claim.
Yeah, that is the claim I'm making is that they would have known if he had risen from the dead.
Sure.
Okay, that's the point. Not that they might remember every single detail, but they will say, I saw him, I witnessed him.
Sure.
Just like the people at 9/11 said, I saw those things came down, I will never forget it. That's the point I'm making.
Okay, and I just wanted to show you that the way in which you had phrased impact events and how they affect testimony.
How did I say it wrongly?
So what it seemed to me, the point you were making, was that the fact that people were, the fact that this event was an impact event for these people leads the testimony to be more likely to be accurate.
Yes.
So the response I would give is that just because something is shown to be an impact event doesn't necessarily mean that it's more likely to be accurate. In fact, it has been shown that the opposite can just as easily, if not more easily, be true.
Okay, well, we'd have to look at those studies because personal experience does not bear that out. Okay,
yeah, of course. I'm saying this less to change your mind on this and more to sort of put this out there that the things that you're saying might not necessarily be true, and even just for you in case you want to change that in the future.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
But my main point is the big issue. In fact, let me just give you one other just so we're clear on this. And this might be helpful when people suggest that, oh, there's errors in the Bible, there's errors in the text, and therefore they couldn't have remembered all this. Take a look at this for a second. Titanic sinks, 1,500 die. The Carpathia was a ship that came over to pull survivors out of the water. They say 675 out of 2,200 were saved. Titanic sinks 4 hours after hitting an iceberg. 866 rescued by Carpathia. Probably 1,250 perish. The Newark Advocate, worst ocean disaster in world's history. Titanic goes down, 1,341 lives are lost. Mm-hmm. Wow. 868, they got the same number here. Washington Post, 1,800 souls lost, says latest wireless from the Olympics. 675 saved, most women and children. Notice in these accounts, these are the dead that were reported by these 4 different sources. They're all different. This is the rescue that were reported, and they're close. These 2 are the same. These are close. What are the true numbers? I guess the question is, what should we conclude from these seemingly contradictory accounts? What do you think?
Sure, but
what would you conclude from that, Jake?
That testimony about specific events isn't necessarily accurate.
Okay, but what do they all agree on?
The fact that the Titanic sank,
That's
which is
it.
what I was going to bring
that's the
up.
point.
That's what I was
okay.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, they may get minor details wrong.
Sure.
Now, in this case, it may be because they didn't have enough information at the time, right? But no one would say, since they disagreed, the Titanic didn't sink. In fact, do you know that eyewitnesses on the Titanic disagreed over how it sank? Some say it went down whole, others say it broke in 2.
Sure.
What do they all agree on? It sank. Now, you might understand why they came to different conclusions. Sure. If you're on the side of the ship, you might have seen it break and go down, but if you're on the stern or the bow, you didn't see it break, and you said, that whole thing went down at once. Also, it was dark, they were in shock, right? Mm-hmm. But there is not a person that did survive that will tell you the Titanic didn't sink.
Sure.
Okay. That's what I'm saying with regard to the resurrection and 9/11. That's my point.
Makes sense.
All right. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
So with regard to Jake, this is very typical among young people who get a little bit of education. They suddenly think that the whole discipline agrees with them all of a sudden, you know. Mm-hmm. So there's some psychological studies that say that people that get details wrong on impact events shows that you can't trust their memories. But that wasn't my point. My point wasn't, do you have all the details right? My point was, would anybody say if Jesus really rose from the dead that he didn't rise from the dead? If in fact if they really witnessed him rise from the dead, right? Everyone's going to agree on that. They may disagree who got to the tomb first, you know, all that kind of thing, you know, what time it was. Okay, fine. It's not the details we're concerned about. It's the big event, just like the Titanic. We may disagree over the details. That's fine. But did the Titanic sink? Yeah, everybody agrees on that. And everybody agrees on the resurrection, too. It's an impact event. I mean, if he really rose from the dead, do you think they would have forgotten that? They would have gotten that wrong? Hey, Peter, remind me, did he really rise from the dead? No, they wouldn't be doing that, right? They might say, was it at did he rise from the dead at 6 a.m. or 6:30? You know.
Right. Right.
One of the things that we have to be mindful of is, a lot of people who don't want to believe, they're going to try and come up with anything, to not have to make that decision, and we don't know psychologically where that young man is. But I know I fought God. I never thought that he didn't believe, but I never wanted him to be my Lord, where I have to say, yes, sir. To the way he's asking me to live for my own good. So it is very interesting to see in these exchanges that you have, Frank, so frequently in college campuses. And I want to let everybody know here, we are going to more college campuses in 2024, Lord willing. And we're going to be doing a lot of awesome stuff this year with your help, everybody who is on the other side of the screen. But yes, and the confusion is spreading, but we fancy ourselves to be one of the first lines of defense in the culture to bring people back to the truth. And it is not my truth. It is not Frank's truth. It is not Phoenix's truth. It is not Cross-Examined's truth. It is the truth. and we have to make sure that we continue doing this.
Now,
Let's
one of the
pull it-
things, wait, well,
Yeah.
one of the things I love about how you responded to this, Frank, is so when a student comes and announces that they've done a study and all the data proves that what you're saying is patently false. I mean, how do you respond to that? We're not walking encyclopedias. Contrary to what some people might believe about the myth, the legend of Frank Turek, he hasn't memorized every study everywhere. But rather than go on the defense, he made a great he took a great strategy and basically said, one, that doesn't bear out in my personal experience, regardless of what the data says. And two, he then appealed to the audience. And it really worked in Frank's favor, because when Jake then said, sure, they think they do, I mean, they all laughed out loud. Like, who is this kid? Like, this kid thinks I don't know where I was.
Right,
So
right.
it was a great move.
I think the other thing too is you always want to stay in the majors rather than the minors.
Correct.
You can say you could even be right that they got, who was at the tomb first. That whole thing that Bart Ehrman brings up. Who got to the tomb first. How many angels were at the tomb. You could say let's say they got that wrong. That there's contradictions. There are not, but let's just, for the sake of argument,
Right.
say they got that wrong. Does that disprove Christianity?
Nah.
Right.
No, they all agree he rose from the dead.
Right,
These
right.
documents wouldn't even exist, written by Jews in the first century, that say a man claimed to be God and rose from the dead. Unless a man really did claim to be God and rose from the dead. Who would make this up? Nobody's going to make this up and get themselves beaten, tortured, and killed. Oh, they got the, they got details. They disagree on the details. Who cares? I mean, for the truth of the matter. Now, as inerrantists, we have to explain these, and we can, many of them.
Yeah.
But the point here is stay on the major issues. Yeah, sure. You might get details wrong, but you're not going to get the main event wrong. That's the point, the main event.
Yeah.